Natalie Parker frantically rummaged through her closet, tossing rejected outfits onto her bed, while her roommate Zoe lounged nearby, scrolling through her phone. "I can't believe I let you talk me into this," Natalie grumbled, holding up a navy blue dress before shaking her head and discarding it with the others. Tonight was her blind date with a man she knew nothing about, except that he was supposedly successful and, according to Zoe's cousin who worked at his company, intimidatingly handsome. "Trust me," Zoe said without looking up. "After that disaster with Ryan, you need someone completely different. Someone who has his life together." Natalie winced at the mention of her ex. 6 months ago, she'd caught him cheating with a co-worker, and the humiliation still stung. At 32, she was tired of dating men who couldn't commit, who treated relationships like temporary amusements until something better came along. "Fine. But you could have told me more than he runs a company," Natalie said, finally settling on a simple black dress that hugged her curves without being too obvious about it. "Does he have a name, hobbies? Any red flags I should know about?" Zoe finally looked up with a mysterious smile. "His name is Jackson Reed. He's 36, never married, and he's the CEO of Reed Innovations. They do something with sustainable building materials. Boring stuff, but apparently very lucrative." She paused dramatically. "No, I don't know his favorite color, or whether he likes pineapple on pizza." "That's what first dates are for." Natalie rolled her eyes but couldn't quiet the flutter of nervousness in her stomach. As a freelance graphic designer, who worked primarily from her apartment, her social circle had shrunk considerably since college. Meeting new people, especially potential romantic partners, had become increasingly difficult. An hour later, Natalie walked into Everett's, an upscale restaurant in downtown Portland, known for its panoramic views of the city. The hostess led her to a corner table where a man sat with his back to her, his broad shoulders filling out an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. When he stood and turned to greet her, Natalie nearly stumbled. Jackson Reed was gorgeous in a way that seemed almost unfair. Tall, with dark hair swept back from a strong-featured face, piercing blue eyes and a jawline that could cut glass. But what struck her most was his expression, or rather the lack of one. His face revealed absolutely nothing as he assessed her. Not disappointment, not pleasure, nothing but cool evaluation. "Natalie," he said, his voice deep and controlled. "Not a question, just a statement of fact." She nodded, extending her hand. "And you're Jackson. Nice to meet you." His handshake was firm but brief, and he immediately pulled out her chair, waiting for her to sit before returning to his own seat. A perfect gentleman, yet something about his demeanor made her feel like she was at a job interview rather than a date. The waiter appeared almost instantly, and Jackson ordered wine without consulting her preferences. "The 2018 Cabernet, if you have it," he said dismissively, his attention already back on Natalie. "So," she said, fighting the urge to fidget under his intense gaze, "Zoe tells me you're in sustainable building materials." "Yes," he replied. "Reed Innovations specializes in eco-friendly construction solutions. We've recently expanded into international markets." His words were precise, efficient, like everything else about him. Natalie waited for him to elaborate or ask about her work, but he simply sipped his water, watching her. The silence stretched uncomfortably, and, "Do you enjoy it?" she prompted. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps that she'd asked about his feelings rather than his success. "It's challenging," he finally said. "I find satisfaction in solving problems others can't." Throughout the appetizers and main course, conversation continued in this stilted fashion. Jackson answered her questions directly, but offered nothing more and asked very little about her in return. He was polite but distant, as though performing a duty rather than exploring a connection. Natalie found herself working harder than she ever had on a first date, trying to crack through his impenetrable facade. "You don't do this often, do you?" she finally asked after their plates had been cleared. His eyebrow arched slightly. "Do what?" "Go on blind dates. Or maybe dates in general." She offered a small smile to soften the observation. For the first time that evening, something like genuine emotion crossed his face, a flicker of discomfort, quickly masked. "No," he admitted. "I don't have much time for social engagements." "Then why did you agree to meet me?" Jackson studied her for a long moment, as though assessing whether she deserved an honest answer. My sister, he finally said. She's friends with your friend's cousin. She thinks I work too much, do you? There's no such thing as working too much when you're building something important. Despite his coldness, Natalie found herself intrigued. There was something beneath that controlled exterior, a drive, a passion for his work that she recognized in herself. As a freelancer who often lost track of time while designing, she understood the satisfaction of creating something from nothing. I understand that, she said. When I'm in the middle of a design project, everything else disappears. But eventually you look up and realize weeks have passed, and you haven't seen another human being except the delivery guy. For the first time that night, Jackson's lips curved into something resembling a smile. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges and making him look younger, more approachable. Exactly, he said, and there was a warmth in his voice that hadn't been there before. As dessert arrived, a chocolate soufflé they agreed to share, Natalie found the conversation flowing more naturally. Jackson asked about her design work, showing genuine interest in her creative process. She discovered he had an eye for architecture and design himself, often providing input on the aesthetic aspects of his company's products. When they stepped outside the restaurant, the night air was crisp with early autumn, and the city lights sparkled around them. They stood awkwardly for a moment, the comfortable dynamic they'd achieved inside the restaurant evaporating in the uncertainty of a potential goodbye. I can drive you home, Jackson offered. Natalie hesitated. Actually, I live just a few blocks from here. I usually walk when the weather's nice. Then I'll walk with you. As they strolled through the quiet streets, Natalie found herself moving closer to him, drawn by some invisible force. When their hands brushed accidentally, neither pulled away. His fingers tentatively intertwined with hers, and despite his earlier coldness, his touch was warm. They reached her apartment building too quickly. Standing on the steps, Natalie turned to thank him for dinner, but the words died in her throat. Jackson was looking at her differently now, his blue eyes dark with an intensity that made her breath catch. I've enjoyed tonight, he said softly. More emotion in those 4 words than in all his previous conversation. Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her. What started as a gentle press of lips quickly deepened into something more urgent, more consuming. His arms encircled her waist, pulling her against him as though he couldn't get close enough. Natalie responded with equal fervor, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, his neck, his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Jackson looked as stunned as she felt. The perfect composure he'd maintained all evening had completely vanished, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. He stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. I should go, he said, his voice rough. Natalie nodded, though disappointment flooded through her. Thank you for dinner. And the walk. Jackson took a step backward, then stopped. He pulled a business card from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. Call me, he said, and it sounded more like a plea than a request. As she watched him walk away, Natalie had the strangest feeling that something momentous had just happened, that a man who never lost control had just lost it completely. With her. What she didn't know was that this unexpected connection would soon pull them both into a whirlwind neither had anticipated, forcing them to confront painful pasts and uncertain futures, all because of one kiss that changed everything. 3 days passed without Natalie calling Jackson. She'd stared at his business card countless times, traced the embossed letters of his name, and nearly dialed the number twice, but something held her back. That kiss had awakened feelings she wasn't prepared for, especially with someone as enigmatic and complex as Jackson Reed. You're overthinking this, Zoe insisted, watching Natalie pace their small living room. The man gave you his card and practically begged you to call him. What are you waiting for? I don't know, Natalie admitted, sinking onto the couch. He was so cold at first, like he couldn't care less about being there. Then suddenly, she touched her lips, remembering the intensity of that kiss. It doesn't make sense. Maybe you cracked the Ice Queen's frozen heart, Zoe teased. Seriously, though, he's probably just not good at first impressions. Give him another chance. Before Natalie could respond, her phone buzzed with an email notification. She glanced at it and sat up straight. It's from Reed Innovations, she said, her voice rising in pitch. They want to discuss a potential contract for rebranding their digital presence. Zoe's eyes widened. No way. He's using his company to contact you? Natalie quickly scanned the email. It's not from him. It's from their marketing director. She looked up at Zoe, confusion evident on her face. This is a legitimate business inquiry. They've seen my portfolio website and want to meet tomorrow to discuss terms. Well, that's one way to ensure you can't ignore him, Zoe said with a laugh. The next morning, Natalie dressed with extra care, selecting a professional but stylish outfit for her meeting at Reed Innovations. The company headquarters occupied the top floors of a sleek glass building downtown, its lobby all polished stone and sustainable bamboo accents. A receptionist led her to a conference room where 3 people waited, none of them Jackson. "Ms. Parker, thank you for coming," said a woman in her 40s with a sharp bob and sharper eyes. "I'm Vanessa Mitchell, Marketing Director. This is our Digital Content Manager, Brian, and our Project Coordinator, Tessa." Natalie shook hands with everyone, still wondering if Jackson would make an appearance. "Thank you for considering my work. I'm curious, though. How exactly did you find me?" Vanessa smiled professionally. "We've been searching for the right designer for months. Your portfolio impressed us, particularly your work for Horizon Outdoors. We're looking for someone who can maintain our brand sophistication while making it more accessible to consumers." For the next hour, they discussed Reed Innovations' rebranding needs. The company wanted to shift its image from purely industrial to something that would resonate with environmentally conscious homeowners. As they talked, Natalie's initial suspicion that this was Jackson's way of reconnecting faded. This was a legitimate opportunity, and a lucrative one at that. As the meeting concluded, Vanessa stood to escort her out. "We'll be in touch by the end of the week with our decision. We're considering 2 other designers, but I must say, your vision aligns well with ours." They were just stepping into the hallway when a door at the end opened, and Jackson emerged with 2 men in suits. He stopped abruptly when he saw Natalie, genuine surprise registering on his face, before his features settled back into their usual impassive mask. "Mr. Reed," Vanessa said, "this is Natalie Parker, one of the designers we're considering for the rebranding project." Jackson's eyes never left Natalie's face. "Ms. Parker and I have met," he said coolly. "She's talented. You'd be wise to secure her services." With a brief nod, he continued down the hallway, leaving Natalie staring after him in confusion. "Well," Vanessa said with raised eyebrows, "it seems you have support from the top." "That's unusual. Mr. Reed rarely comments on marketing decisions." Back in her apartment that evening, Natalie finally pulled out Jackson's business card and dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. "This is Jackson Reed. Leave a message. No pleasantries, just efficiency. Hi, Jackson. It's Natalie Parker. I had a meeting at your company today which was unexpected. I'm not sure if you knew about that, but I wanted to call anyway. About the other night." She paused, suddenly unsure what to say. "I'd like to see you again. Call me back if you're interested." She hung up, immediately regretting the message. She sounded desperate, or worse, accusatory. But before she could berate herself further, her phone rang. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. "Natalie," he said when she answered, his deep voice sending an involuntary shiver through her. "I just got your message." "That was fast," she said, trying to sound casual. "I was about to call you when you called me." There was a pause. "I didn't know you were meeting with marketing today." "That was coincidental. So you didn't arrange it?" "No." Another pause. "Though I'm not displeased by the development." Natalie found herself smiling at his formal way of speaking. "I thought maybe it was your way of ensuring I couldn't ignore you." "Did you need ensuring?" There was a hint of vulnerability in the question that touched her. "No," she admitted. "I've been thinking about you. About that kiss." The line went quiet for so long that Natalie wondered if they'd been disconnected. Finally, Jackson spoke, his voice lower, more intimate. "I'd like to see you again. Tonight, if you're free." 2 hours later, Natalie found herself in Jackson's penthouse apartment, a stunning space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Unlike the sterile corporate environment she'd expected, his home was warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture and an impressive art collection. "These are beautiful," she said, examining a series of black and white photographs depicting urban landscapes from around the world. "Did you take these?" Jackson handed her a glass of wine. "My father did," he said quietly. "He was a photographer before he died." Natalie turned to him, surprised by this personal revelation. "I'm sorry about your father." Were you close? Something shadowed Jackson's eyes. We were once. Before everything changed. He gestured toward the couch. Please sit. Are you hungry? I can order something. They settled on the couch with Thai food, and as they ate, Natalie noticed Jackson gradually relaxing, his responses becoming less clipped, more thoughtful. He asked questions about her childhood in a small Minnesota town, her move to Portland after college, her decision to go freelance after 5 years at an advertising agency. You took a risk, he observed, leaving a stable position to build something of your own. Natalie nodded. It was terrifying at first. I lived on ramen and worked 18-hour days. But being able to choose my projects, to create without compromise, it was worth it. Jackson studied her with those intense blue eyes. That's rare, you know. Most people choose security over passion. What about you? She asked. Did you always want to run your own company? His expression darkened slightly. No. I was studying architecture when my father died. He left the company to me and my sister Charlotte. She was 16, still in high school. So I had to step in to secure our future. You gave up your dreams for her, Natalie said softly. Jackson looked surprised, as though this perspective had never occurred to him. I did what was necessary, he said finally. The company was failing when I took over. Transforming it into what it is today became my new dream. As the evening progressed, they moved closer on the couch, the initial awkwardness dissolving into a comfortable intimacy. When Jackson kissed her again, it was slower than their first kiss, but no less intense, as though he was savoring every moment. Later, as they stood by the windows, looking out at the glittering city lights, Jackson's arms wrapped around her from behind. He whispered against her hair, I can't seem to let you go. Natalie Parker. The admission seemed to cost him something, as though exposing a weakness he'd rather keep hidden. Natalie turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. Then don't, she said simply. For several weeks they fell into a pattern, evenings at his apartment or hers, weekend mornings at quiet cafes, walks along the waterfront, where Jackson gradually shared more of himself, his complicated relationship with his father, his protectiveness toward his sister, his secret regret at abandoning architecture. Natalie found herself opening up too, telling him about her parents' difficult divorce, her struggles with confidence in her work, her fears about truly trusting someone again after Ryan's betrayal. What she didn't tell him was that Reed Innovations had offered her the contract, and she'd accepted. Somehow, it never seemed the right time to mention it, especially as Jackson never brought up work when they were together. It was as if he compartmentalized his life completely, CEO by day, just Jackson with her. She told herself she'd mention it when the project actually began, not wanting to complicate their burgeoning relationship with business. Then came the night that changed everything. They were at a restaurant celebrating 1 month since their first date when Jackson's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. I need to take this. It's Charlotte. He stepped away from the table, his back rigid with sudden tension. When he returned, his face had transformed back into the cold mask she'd seen on their first date. I have to go, he said, already signaling for the check. Family emergency. Is everything okay? Can I help? Natalie reached for his hand, but he pulled away subtly. No, this is personal. His tone left no room for discussion. He drove her home in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When they reached her apartment, he didn't turn off the engine. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, not meeting her eyes. But he didn't call the next day or the day after. Natalie left messages that went unanswered. On the third day, she received an email from Vanessa Mitchell confirming the start date for the rebranding project. As the primary contact for Reed Innovations, she'd have to face Jackson professionally, even as he was ignoring her. Personally, what Natalie didn't know was that the family emergency involved a secret. Jackson had kept buried for years, a secret that would test everything building between them, forcing both to confront whether what they felt was strong, enough to overcome the walls he'd built, to protect himself from the pain of his past. Natalie's first day working at Reed Innovations was nothing short of excruciating. She sat in the sleek conference room, presenting her initial concepts to the marketing team, constantly aware that Jackson might walk in at any moment. He didn't. According to Vanessa, he was tied up in meetings all day, which Natalie suspected was code for deliberately avoiding you. These concepts are exactly what we're looking for, Vanessa said, examining the mood boards and digital mock-ups Natalie had prepared. Especially this one. It maintains the corporate professionalism while adding warmth and accessibility. Natalie forced a smile, trying to focus on the professional opportunity rather than her personal disappointment. I'm glad you think so. I can have revised versions ready by next week, incorporating your feedback. As she packed up her materials, Brian, the digital content manager, lingered behind. Just so you know, he said quietly, the boss has been in a terrible mood all week. Whatever's going on has nothing to do with your work. Thanks, Natalie replied, unsure whether to be comforted or more concerned by this information. I appreciate that. She was waiting for the elevator when the doors opened to reveal Charlotte Reed. Natalie recognized her immediately from photos in Jackson's apartment. The same striking blue eyes, though her hair was blonde, where his was dark. Charlotte looked at her curiously. You're Natalie, aren't you? She asked, stepping out of the elevator. I'm Charlotte Jackson's sister. Natalie shook her hand, surprised. Yes, I'm Natalie. How did you... Jackson described you perfectly, Charlotte said with a warm smile that contrasted sharply with her brother's usual reserve. Plus, you're carrying design portfolios, and I know you're working on our rebranding. It's nice to meet you, Natalie said sincerely. Jackson has told me a lot about you. Charlotte's eyebrows rose. Has he? That's unusual for my brother. She glanced at her watch. Listen, do you have time for a coffee? There's a place downstairs that makes a decent latte. 20 minutes later, they were seated in a corner of the building's cafe, Charlotte stirring her drink thoughtfully. I suppose you're wondering why Jackson has been avoiding you, she said without preamble. Natalie nearly choked on her cappuccino. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows him well, Charlotte sighed. He's not good at this, relationships, opening up, trusting people. Our father's death hit him particularly hard. He mentioned that he took over the company when your father passed away. Charlotte's expression darkened. What he probably didn't tell you is that our father didn't simply die. He took his own life after the company faced bankruptcy due to his gambling addiction. She delivered this bombshell matter-of-factly, though pain flickered in her eyes. Jackson was 22 in his final year of architecture school. He dropped everything to save the company and take care of me. Natalie sat in stunned silence, pieces of Jackson's character suddenly falling into place. His control, his guardedness, his intense focus on work. I had no idea, she finally managed. Of course not. Jackson never talks about it. Charlotte leaned forward. The emergency last week. It was the anniversary of our father's death. Jackson always disappears on that day. Won't talk to anyone, won't see anyone. It's like he transforms back into that devastated 22-year-old who found our father's body. Natalie felt a wave of compassion wash over her. I wish he'd told me. I could have been there for him. That's exactly what he's afraid of, being vulnerable, needing someone. Charlotte smiled sadly. You're the first woman he's talked about in years, you know. The first one he's let get close at all. Well, he's pushed me away now, Natalie said, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. Charlotte reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Give him time. He'll come around. But days passed with no word from Jackson. Natalie threw herself into the rebranding project, spending long hours at Reed Innovations, occasionally catching glimpses of him in hallways or meeting rooms. He always acknowledged her with a polite nod, as though they were mere acquaintances, before quickly moving on. 2 weeks into the project, Natalie was working late in the conference room she'd been assigned, surrounded by design boards and digital tablets. Most of the staff had gone home, the office quiet except for the occasional sound of the cleaning crew. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice someone enter until a voice broke the silence. You're still here. Natalie looked up to find Jackson standing in the doorway, his tie loosened, jacket discarded. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes suggesting he hadn't been sleeping well. Deadline tomorrow, she said, gesturing to the scattered materials. Vanessa wants the final concepts presented to the board. Jackson nodded, stepping further into the room. He examined one of her designs, his expression unreadable. This is good work. Thank you. Natalie kept her voice neutral, professional, though her heart was racing at his proximity. Natalie, he stopped, running a hand through his hair in a rare gesture of frustration. I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Reed, she said, emphasizing his title. Our personal relationship has no bearing on my professional commitments to your company. A flash of pain crossed his face at her formality. Please don't do that. Don't pretend what was between us didn't matter. Wasn't. Past tense. Natalie stood, needing to create distance between them. So you made that quite clear when you disappeared without a word for 2 weeks. I needed time, and I needed an explanation. Not silence, not avoidance. Just honesty. The hurt she'd been suppressing burst forth. Do you know how it felt coming to work here every day, seeing you avoid me like I was contagious? After everything we shared? Jackson's carefully maintained control cracked. I couldn't face you. Not after, he broke off, turning away. After what? What happened that night, Jackson? What was the emergency that was so terrible you couldn't even send a text saying I need space? He was silent for so long that Natalie thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. It was the anniversary of my father's suicide. The anger drained from Natalie, replaced by the compassion she'd felt when Charlotte first told her. I know, she said softly. Charlotte told me. Jackson whirled around, shock evident on his face. Charlotte told you about our father? We had coffee a couple of weeks ago. She recognized me in the lobby. Natalie took a step toward him. Jackson, I'm so sorry about your father. I understand why that day is difficult for you. No, you don't understand, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Every year on that day I visit his grave, and every year I promise him that I won't make his mistakes, that I won't let anything or anyone distract me from protecting what he left behind, and that includes me. I'm just a distraction. The words stung even as she said them. No. Yes, I don't know. He paced the room, agitated in a way she'd never seen him. When I'm with you, I want things I've never allowed myself to want. I think about possibilities beyond work, beyond obligations. It terrifies me. Why? What's so frightening about being happy? Because happiness can be taken away. The words burst from him like they'd been trapped for years. One day everything is perfect, and the next, the person you trusted most in the world is gone, and you're left picking up the pieces of the life they shattered. Natalie's heart ached for him, for the young man who'd had responsibility thrust upon him before he was ready. Jackson, what happened to your father was tragic, but it doesn't mean history will repeat itself. You're not him, aren't I? I see him in the mirror sometimes. The same drive, the same obsession with success. He stopped pacing, looking at her with raw vulnerability. What if I hurt you the way he hurt us? What if I can't be what you need? That's my decision to make, not yours, Natalie said firmly. You don't get to decide what's best for me by shutting me out. Before Jackson could respond, the door opened and Brian appeared, looking uncomfortable at interrupting. Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Reed, but Ms. Mitchell asked me to deliver these reports before I left. He placed a folder on the table and quickly retreated. The interruption broke the tension, reminding them both of where they were. Jackson straightened, his professional mask slipping back into place, though his eyes remained turbulent with emotion. We shouldn't discuss this here, he said. Can we talk later? Tonight? Natalie hesitated, torn between self-protection and the desire to understand this complicated man. Your place, 9 o'clock, she finally agreed. But Jackson, if you shut me out again, that's it. I won't give you another chance to hurt me. He nodded solemnly. I understand. At precisely 9, Natalie knocked on Jackson's door. He opened it immediately, as though he'd been waiting nearby. The penthouse was dimly lit. A bottle of wine open on the coffee table, 2 glasses waiting. Thank you for coming, he said, taking her coat. Would you like some wine? Please. Natalie accepted the glass he offered, taking a sip to steady her nerves. So talk. Jackson sat beside her on the couch, close but not touching. First, I want to apologize for disappearing. It was cowardly and unfair to you. He twisted his wine glass in his hands, staring into the dark liquid. The truth is, I've never let anyone get as close to me as you have, not since my father died. When that anniversary came around, all I could think was that I was breaking my promise to him by falling for you. Falling for me? Natalie repeated softly. Jackson met her eyes, his own vulnerable and sincere. Yes, I'm in love with you, Natalie. And it terrifies me because the last time I loved someone that much, they destroyed everything. Jackson, I'm not your father, and you're not responsible for his choices. I know that logically, but emotionally, he shook his head. When I took over the company, it was like taking on his identity. Everything I've built has been to redeem his legacy, to prove that his life wasn't defined by his final act. He reached for her hand, tentatively. Then you came along and suddenly I wanted something for myself, separate from all that. It felt like betrayal. Natalie intertwined her fingers with his. It's not betrayal to live your own life, to want happiness for yourself. I'm beginning to understand that, he said. These 2 weeks without you have been miserable. I buried myself in work, but all I could think about was you. Your smile, your passion for your art, the way you see beneath the surface of things. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. I don't want to lose you, Natalie. I want to really try to be worthy of you. You already are, she whispered, leaning forward to kiss him softly. All I need is for you to be honest with me, to let me in even when it's difficult. As they held each other on the couch, Natalie believed they'd overcome the biggest obstacle between them. She didn't yet know that an even greater challenge lurked on the horizon, one that would test not only Jackson's ability to trust, but her own capacity to forgive when a shocking revelation threatened everything they were building together. For the next month, everything seemed perfect between Natalie and Jackson. He made a conscious effort to be more open, sharing childhood memories, talking about his dreams for the future, even occasionally leaving work early to spend time with her. Natalie found herself falling deeper in love with the man beneath the CEO facade, thoughtful, passionate, and surprisingly playful when he allowed himself to relax. The rebranding project was nearing completion, with the board unanimously approving Natalie's designs. Reed Innovations was already implementing her work across their digital platforms, and Vanessa had hinted at the possibility of extending her contract for additional marketing materials. We should celebrate, Jackson said one evening as they cooked dinner together in his penthouse kitchen. Your work is transforming the company's image. The initial feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Natalie smiled, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry. It's been a dream project, honestly. Your team gave me so much creative freedom. Jackson paused in stirring the sauce, looking at her thoughtfully. Have you considered taking on a permanent role somewhere? Reed Innovations would be lucky to have you on staff. Are you offering me a job, Mr. Reed? She teased. Hypothetically, he said, his tone light but his eyes serious. Would you want that? To work for one company rather than freelancing? Natalie considered the question. I don't know. I love the variety of freelancing, the freedom to choose projects that excite me. But there's something appealing about being part of a team, building something together over time. She glanced at him. Why do you ask? Just thinking about the future, he said, returning to the sauce. Our future. The words sent a pleasant warmth through her. They hadn't explicitly discussed long-term plans, but it was becoming increasingly clear that what they had was serious, potentially lasting. That weekend, Jackson surprised her with tickets to an architecture exhibition featuring innovative, sustainable designs from around the world. As they wandered through the displays, his eyes lit up with genuine passion, reminding Natalie of his abandoned dreams. You still love it, don't you? She asked as he explained the intricacies of a particularly striking design. Architecture. A wistful expression crossed his face. I do. Sometimes I sketch buildings in my spare time, just for myself. He smiled ruefully. Not that I have much spare time. You could make time, she suggested. Maybe take a class or just set aside an hour each week to draw. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, Jackson. He squeezed her hand gratefully. You make me believe that's possible, that I can be more than just the CEO of Reed Innovations. Later that night, lying in bed with her head on his chest, Natalie finally asked the question that had been lingering in her mind. Have you ever thought about going back to it? Not giving up the company, but maybe shifting roles, focusing on the architectural aspects of the business. Jackson was quiet for so long that she thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke, his voice vibrating under her ear. Charlotte suggested something similar last year. She's been taking on more responsibility in operations and finance. She's good at it, better than me in some ways. So it's not impossible. No, not impossible. His arms tightened around her. Just difficult to imagine after spending so long defining myself by that role. You're so much more than your job title, Natalie said softly, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. You're Jackson Reed, brilliant, compassionate, stubborn, occasionally infuriating, and the man I love. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. Infuriating? Sometimes, she admitted with a smile, but I wouldn't change you. The following Tuesday, Natalie was at Reed Innovations for her final presentation to the executive team. She'd just finished setting up in the boardroom when the door opened, and a man she'd never seen before walked in. Tall with salt and pepper hair and an expensive suit, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "You must be Natalie Parker," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard great things about your work. I'm Robert Caldwell, CFO of MergeTech Solutions." Natalie shook his hand, puzzled. "Nice to meet you. I wasn't aware anyone from MergeTech would be attending today." Something like surprise flickered across Robert's face. "Really? I assumed you'd been briefed, given your personal connection to Jackson." Before Natalie could ask what he meant, other executives began filing in, including Vanessa and several board members. Jackson entered last, looking impeccable in a charcoal suit that matched his suddenly serious demeanor. He nodded professionally at Natalie before taking his seat at the head of the table. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "Before Ms. Parker presents the final phase of our rebranding, I have an announcement." He gestured to Robert Caldwell. "As some of you already know, we've been in discussions with MergeTech Solutions regarding a potential merger. Today I'm pleased to inform you that we've reached a preliminary agreement." Murmurs rippled through the room. Natalie stared at Jackson in shock. He hadn't mentioned anything about a merger. Not once in all their conversations about the company. "This partnership will allow Reed Innovations to expand globally at an accelerated pace," Jackson continued, his voice steady and businesslike. "Mr. Caldwell is here to observe our rebranding presentation, as their team will be working to integrate our new image with their existing marketing strategy." Throughout her presentation, Natalie struggled to maintain her professional composure. Questions swirled in her mind. Why hadn't Jackson told her about something so significant? Was this why he'd asked about her taking a permanent position? Because he knew the company was changing hands. When the meeting concluded, executives congratulated her on the successful project while filing out. Jackson remained seated, his expression unreadable as he gathered his papers. Natalie waited until they were alone before confronting him. "When were you going to tell me about the merger?" she asked quietly. Jackson finally looked up, his eyes guarded. "It wasn't finalized until yesterday. The negotiations have been confidential." "Confidential from your girlfriend, you mean?" Hurt colored her voice. "We've talked about the company nearly every day for weeks, Jackson. You had plenty of opportunities to mention that you were selling it." "I'm not selling it," he corrected. "It's a merger. I'll remain on the board and head the new Sustainable Architecture Division." Natalie stared at him. "The Architecture Division? So you were going back to architecture?" A flash of something guilt crossed his face. "That was part of the negotiation. I'd been considering it for a while. Since our conversation the other night." "No longer than that." Jackson stood, moving toward her. "Natalie, I couldn't discuss it with you. There are legal implications, confidentiality agreements." She stepped back, maintaining distance between them. "I understand confidentiality, Jackson. What I don't understand is why you'd keep something this important from me personally, especially when you knew I was working on rebranding the very company you're merging." Before he could respond, there was a knock at the door and Robert Caldwell entered. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, though his expression suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "Jackson, we need to discuss the press release. And Miss Parker, I'd like to arrange a meeting with you and our marketing team. Your work is impressive. We might be interested in bringing you on for the transition period." "Thank you, but I need to consider my schedule," Natalie replied professionally, gathering her materials. "If you'll excuse me, I have another appointment." She left quickly, ignoring Jackson's call of her name as she headed for the elevator. Once outside the building, she pulled out her phone and called Zoe. "Can you meet me at Riverside Park? I need fresh air and a friend right now." An hour later, they sat on a bench overlooking the water, Natalie having explained the situation through intermittent tears. "I just don't understand why he wouldn't tell me," she said, clutching the coffee Zoe had brought. "He's been talking about opening up, being honest, and all the while he's been planning this massive change." Zoe considered this. "Maybe he was afraid of how you'd react. You said he struggled with change, with letting go of the company his father left him. But that's the thing, this is exactly what we talked about just a few days ago. Me encouraging him to pursue architecture again, Him mentioning Charlotte taking on more responsibility. Natalie shook her head in frustration. It's like he was testing my reaction without actually telling me what was happening. Men, Zoe sighed. They think they're being strategic when they're just being idiots. Despite herself, Natalie laughed. It just hurts, you know? I thought we were past this, the secrets, the walls between us. What are you going to do? I don't know, Natalie admitted. Part of me wants to hear him out, but another part wonders what else he's keeping from me. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. Please let me explain. Meet me at the penthouse tonight? Natalie stared at the message, conflicted. If I go, am I just setting myself up for more disappointment? Only you can answer that, Zoe said gently. But ask yourself this. Is what you have with him worth fighting for? No relationship is perfect, Nat. Sometimes people make mistakes trying to protect what matters to them. That evening, Natalie found herself standing outside Jackson's door, still uncertain if she was making the right choice. Before she could knock, the door opened to reveal Jackson looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his tie gone, shirt sleeves rolled up. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I, she replied honestly, stepping inside. The penthouse had been transformed. The dining table was set for dinner, candlelight flickering softly. A large drawing board stood in the living room, covered with architectural sketches. What is all this? Natalie asked, moving toward the drawings. My vision, Jackson said, following her. For the new sustainable housing division I'll be heading. Affordable, eco-friendly homes that don't sacrifice design or quality. He picked up one sketch, offering it to her. This one was inspired by something you said about spaces that nurture creativity. Natalie examined the drawing, a beautiful, innovative design that seamlessly integrated nature with living space. These are amazing, Jackson. You're incredibly talented. Thank you. He hesitated. Natalie, I need to explain about today. About why I didn't tell you about the merger. She placed the drawing down carefully. I'm listening. Jackson took a deep breath. I've been working on this deal for almost a year, long before I met you. When negotiations intensified 3 months ago, I was legally bound to confidentiality. He ran a hand through his hair. But that's not the whole truth. I could have told you something was happening in general terms. So why didn't you? Because I was afraid, he admitted, vulnerability raw in his voice. Afraid that talking about it would make it real, that I would be betraying my father's legacy by changing the company so fundamentally. He moved closer to her. And then when we talked about architecture, about me returning to it someday, your support meant everything to me. I wanted to surprise you with the news once it was finalized, to show you that I was taking your advice, finding balance. Jackson, relationships don't work that way. I don't need grand gestures or surprises. I need honesty even when it's difficult. I know that now. He reached for her hands, and this time she didn't pull away. I've spent so long making decisions alone, carrying everything on my shoulders, that I've forgotten how to truly share my life with someone. His blue eyes held hers intently. But I want to learn with you. I want to build something together, Natalie. Not just a relationship, but a life. From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet box, and Natalie's breath caught. Jackson, I'm not proposing, he said quickly. Not yet. That would be rushing things, especially today. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver key. This is a key to my penthouse. I want you to have it, to know that my home and my heart are open to you always. No more locked doors, no more secrets. Tears welled in Natalie's eyes as she took the key. This is a start, she said softly. But Jackson, I need to know that you'll be open with me going forward. Not just about work, but about everything. Your fears, your doubts, all of it. I promise, he said, drawing her into his arms. No more hiding. 6 months later, Natalie stood in the garden of a beautifully restored farmhouse in the countryside outside Portland. Reed Innovations had successfully merged with MergeTech, and Jackson had indeed taken over the new sustainable architecture division, thriving in his return to creative work. Natalie had accepted a position as creative director for the merged company, heading a team of designers while maintaining the freedom to take on occasional freelance projects. Penny, for your thoughts? Jackson's voice came from behind her as his arms encircled her waist. Just thinking about how much has changed, she said, leaning back against him. A year ago, I was reluctantly going on a blind date with a cold CEO who barely spoke 3 words to me. He chuckled. the sound rumbling pleasantly against her back. And now? And now we're celebrating our housewarming with friends and family in this incredible home you designed. She turned in his arms to face him. Who would have thought one kiss could lead to all this? I knew, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The moment I kissed you that first night, I couldn't let you go. I just needed time to realize that holding on didn't mean controlling everything. It meant trusting enough to share the journey. As Charlotte called them inside to join the gathering, Jackson took Natalie's hand, the simple engagement ring he'd given her last month catching the late afternoon sunlight. They had decided to have a long engagement, giving themselves time to grow together before taking the next step. Jackson was in therapy, working through the trauma of his father's death and his fear of vulnerability. Natalie was flourishing in her new role, her confidence growing as she led her team with the same passion she brought to her own designs. Ready? Jackson asked, his eyes full of the warmth that was now familiar rather than surprising. Ready, Natalie confirmed, squeezing his hand. Together they walked toward the house filled with laughter and conversation, toward the future they were building day by day. What had started as a reluctant blind date with a seemingly cold CEO had transformed into a partnership of equals, each helping the other become more fully themselves. And it had all begun with an unexpected kiss that neither of them could forget. The moment when two guarded hearts had recognized, despite all fears and doubts, that some connections are simply too powerful to deny.